So we've been preaching through Nehemiah, and we're just about to get to the end of that. And I'm thinking one more time. I'm just going to pick one verse out of it, verse 27, and read this verse, but my comments are on the whole chapter of chapter 12 of Nehemiah. And so the verse is 20. Now at the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought out the Levites in all their places to bring them to Jerusalem to celebrate the dedication with gladness. Cymbals and stringed instruments and harps. Now, they didn't mind using all manner of instruments in the Bible with their songs. Who become king, the one who slew the giant, he was the one instrumental for actually making instruments and playing instruments, song and music, and the book of Psalms is really all about the songs that were written to be places. So when we think about a dedication, because that's what this chapter is all about, dedication, and the word dedicate. And all kinds of things are dedicated today. You know, they dedicate the public stuff, and often to a particular person, where, you know, things are dedicated to who was responsible for giving a whole lot of money. Sad to say, and I said, I don't know if I'll say anything or not, but I guess I will. That have dedications to, that's a good thing to have a dedication. But it's so sad that people's names become plastered. Had nothing to do with it, but we have them on the windows and on the pews. And I looked this morning, I said, I don't know if it's on every pew or not, but yeah, there's a placard on every single pew in the building. It's so sad that people do it that way, because we're not supposed to, when we do our good works, you know, we're not supposed to placard it up somewhere. That people did years ago in order to raise money. The family would donate so much money for a pew, and they put their name on it. If they would donate money for a window, they put their name on it. But I think there's not a single person here left, unless Miss Ellen, you might be the only one left, who's here, who's where the people's at, right? You know, so that doesn't mean much if people are not here. I'm sure that this was dedicated, like most churches, was dedicated to the Lord for the Lord's work. Nehemiah chapter 9, the people dedicated themselves to God. They repented and they returned to God and they gave themselves to God. When we get to chapter 9 in Nehemiah, we see that the people dedicated themselves. They were looking people to fill up the city of Jerusalem, and they even casted lots as they did in Bible days to find out who would volunteer. It was a big thing, you know, if you thing to do, but it was a hard thing. You'd have to leave your family and all your possessions and then move to Jerusalem. If anybody has ever moved away before from that is, you know, because you just, it goes on for years too. I mean, if you have kids and you got to make different schools, there's different grocery stores. It's hard often to move away. And these people dedicated themselves, so many, to move to Jerusalem. And now we got chapter 12, and they dedicated the wall. And Nehemiah is all about this wall they built. It was important. It was a big thing. It would protect the city. The dedication of the wall was not all about the wall itself. Inside of the wall that was the important thing, not just the wall, but what was inside the wall. It was the city and the temple and the people actually, Nehemiah got the people to form two different groups for this dedication ceremony. And they actually walked around the wall and stood there, and they had this ceremony on top of the wall, right? Pretty. Doing so, as they had this ceremony and unto the Lord, I think they were kind of saying, we're giving you all. They surrounded the city. Cities weren't big as they are these days. It was a small, and they rebuilt over and over. I think some of the original stones laid way back or down really over and over because of war. But it was not like we would think of the towns. So they were able to do that. They just give it all to God, you know. They got on the wall and they surrounded it. We're giving you all of it today. Sometimes we tend to forget that all that we have is God's. It becomes hard for us to take and give anything to the Lord, or the Lord's work, or in my pocket. I could use this money for something else, or what I have. I remember a fella, I happened to run into him this week, but he told me, I remember the comment he made when he looked at me, and he said, you know, he said, what good is it if I can't do something for the Lord with it? I think he was talking about his truck. What good is my truck if I can't do something? What good is anything that we have? What good is it? What value is it if we can't take somebody else with it? If all we do is take what we have and what we own and do for our own self, of what lasting. And so the word stuck with me when I was very young, and I always remembered it. What good is it if I can't use it for the Lord? And I think it's so true. Whatever we have, we can give it. It's all His anyway. You know, people think on particular amounts that we're to give to the Lord. I don't look at it like that. I don't believe it like that. I don't believe there's a particular amount that we owe to give to God. I don't use that to get money out of people. I just tell the Lord. But the fact about it is that 10% or whatever that number is you put to it, that's not all that God owns. He owns it all anyway. It's all God's. So whatever it is, if He puts it in your heart to help somebody, just do it. And I often sit around and I think, well, I just ain't doing nothing for the Lord. That's the way I feel. I like to do a whole lot for Him, and it seems like I ain't doing anything for Him. But if something comes around, I feel like, well, you know, I think we can do that. You just doesn't do it, right? Whatever. I ain't doing nothing. My little 2 cents. I know that's what I felt like in the mountains. I'm like, what we're doing? And I tell people when I went out and I'd hand them a pie. And I was sitting there thinking, you know, this guy don't have no place to stay. You know, he lost all his possessions. And he'd tell me thank you for this little plate of food. I'm like, this is just a little thing. I said, this is just a little thing. It's so little in the scheme of the needs that are in our world. Help where you can help. You know, you got to do what you can do where you can do it at. That's important to somebody else. To the Lord. It was the rulers, verse 31, verse 40, the rulers got together, and that was like the governor and the political leaders. We had the leaders, verse 24 refers to the priest. They got together and walked on the wall. And then they formed two big choirs. And when they went up onto the wall, on the wall for the dedication ceremony, the other group went to the other way. And they just surrounded it. And they met over the house of God, is what it says. Now, I don't completely understand that but apparently that the temple was close to the wall, and so that point where they met, I'm thinking in my close enough that they considered it meeting at the house of the Lord. They met at the house of the Lord. That's a good thing to do, to meet at the house of the Lord. It ought to be not because of the buildings or anything, but just because you should be in the company of others who have faith as you have. It strengthens our faith to be around others like that. The rulers and the people and the singers, and they all just gathered together. There was no separation of church and state, right? We have a separation of church and state today. Like that in the Constitution, but it is there. In fact, it's in the First Amendment. I don't know if you know the word, and I looked it up because I wasn't sure exactly how it was worded on document, but the wording on the First Amendment shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. And it is kind of a separation of church and state. It means that the government of our because they like to interfere in the day and time with that. They're not supposed to legislate any law over what. But it won't. But a couple of years ago, our own governor stood up there and said that it was illegal for people in churches as well as other establishments to meet over 60 people during COVID. You can't have any public meetings, including churches, with 40 members if you have at least 40 members. And they took them to court for that. And they won. Because it went against what the Constitution said, but people are doing it all the time. And leaders and rulers are doing it all the time. We have a separation to Nehemiah and his group that the rulers and everybody just come together, and there wasn't no really separation there. That was a good thing, but this ain't Nehemiah's day today. This is our day and time. It was our early fathers that founded the country that made sure that clause was in it. It was so important to them that they put it in that First Amendment to the Constitution. Why did they do that? And in England, that's why. You know, they back before their day, there wasn't a Protestant movement, there wasn't a Protestant church, and they're going back to the time the Pope and the Catholic Church had joined up with the king, and they were all working together. And the problem with that came in, is that would be happy about it, that they go along with it. The church became more liberal, more watered down. Like is happening to us today. It became worse and worse between the state and the church. So when they began this country, and one of the main reasons they settled, but one of the main reasons was the opportunity, the freedom to be able to worship apart from what Rome had to say about it. To worship in liberty. New churches were being formed, and it was exciting, and people were thrilled to step out and be part of this church. So they safeguarded us to keep the government from stepping in and making laws that would keep us from worshiping God said. So it's kind of a good thing today that we have it. But mark my words that with each year that passes, they're doing more and more and more. They're really trying really hard to put an end to the way we believe. They don't like it, and many places in the world don't like it. They're going to do everything they can against it. Now I'm going to move on. I'm going to say point one, that in this dedication, that they dedicated with a great sacrifice. In verse 42, it speaks about the great sacrifices. And back in these days, we tend to think about that the sacrifice, they only had one lamb, but that wasn't always the case. The first temple, Solomon had thousands of lambs and sheep offered, thousands sacrificed at the altar. To say how big the sacrifice was, it was a great sacrifice. So there was at least hundreds and perhaps thousands of lambs and goats and stuff were offered upon the sacrifice, given to God. How God had allowed them to secure their city for their families, their wives, their children, and themselves. In 2 Samuel 24:24, and I didn't write it down, I'm just going to refer to it today. But when David bought that he was going to use it and build an altar on to sacrifice to the Lord. Well, Arnon, he just wanted to give it to you. He said, no, I will not offer burnt sacrifices upon something that cost me nothing. And David was saying that's not really a sacrifice. People kind of had that idea today too. They act like they're doing something if they give their old wore out clothes away. I'm just going to donate these clothes. I'm not making fun of anybody today, but if we donate our clothes, we ought to donate something that. Otherwise, we'll have to throw things in the trash if they're no good, or use them for rags. Me, I use it for paper rags myself, or grease or whatever. I would like to have something that we would like to have ourselves, something of value. Well, it ain't a sacrifice if it costs us nothing. That's what means, that it's going to cost us something if we give it to the Lord. I'm just going to tell you today, they had a great dedication ceremony because they had great sacrifices. They offered him a lot. It was something that cost them something. Give nothing but our leftovers to the Lord, and it don't really cost us anything. We're not really dedicating much of nothing to him. Number two, they dedicated with gladness and great joy. And those words are all throughout this chapter. In fact, verse 43 says, also, that day they offered great sacrifices and rejoiced. For God had made them rejoice with great joy. The women, the children also rejoiced, so that the joy of Jerusalem was heard from afar off. Worship, and great worship, is always accompanied by great joy. How about that? Always accompanied by great joy. And it's not happiness. I thought about, and I know this ain't Christmas. No, not yet. It'll be here soon. But I thought about the wise men. When the Bible says, Matthew 2 verse 10 said that they rejoiced with great joy. We know what the wise men did. They went to Jesus and the Messiah. They knew he was going to be king of the Jews. They worshiped him, and they had great joy. Shepherds, it was the same way in Luke chapter 2 verse 10, when the angel of the Lord appeared unto the shepherds. The angel said, Bible said the shepherds left, and they immediately went to find him, and they worshiped him. And great worship is always accompanied by great joy. If it doesn't bring joy to you when you're worshiping at all, it's so unfortunate sometimes, and I invite everybody to come to the church, but I don't want people to get that wrong idea, because people have a stereotype in their mind about church that I've tried to do and have tried to do was tear apart those stereotypes. You don't have to dress a certain way to come to church. If you like to dress up, that's good. We won't make fun of you. In fact, I'll probably give you a compliment if you look good. Don't take it personally. Don't take it the wrong way. But you don't have to do that, and just be yourself and come as you are. And I like that you have to be a certain way, talk a certain way, and act a certain way to come to church. Because really all we're doing is we're just coming and we're meeting together. We're two or more gathered. And today, there's a trend to just come and worship as you are. Come and you can wear your formal suit if you want to, or you can come in your casual suit. Just don't come in your birthday suit. They dedicated with song. This is 3. With song, verse 8. They did. It was a time of music and instruments. It was a time of praise. Up on the wall, there was choirs, and they were singing, and they was singing responsively, if I understand what the chapter said. They wanted to sing those words, and probably right out of the book of Psalms. They prayed and they gave thanksgiving. Verse 27 uses the word celebrate. It was a time of celebration. It was as if we were dedicating a building this morning. It's a perfect, I thought about it. This is a perfect building dedication ceremony right here going on. And a time of thanksgiving, as we said earlier, Thanksgiving is so important. Celebration, in all this part of what we haven't, if celebration is not involved in this, right? If we're not joyous in it. And it's very easy to come to church and to leave and just not really get anything out of it. It all depends on the attitude that we have. If our attitude is not right, then we leave with a bad attitude. Right? It's true. It's up to us what we put into it. And 4, they dedicated it loudly, the bottom of verse 43. It was interesting, it said, so let's see, the women and Jerusalem was heard afar off. Wow, how about that? These people were getting loud, weren't they? At the time. And I don't think they cared what anybody thought about it. They weren't being proper at all. They were just getting louder and louder and louder, enjoying and worshiping the Lord, and they were all excited about this wall. I mean, the enthusiasm was heard from afar off. You know, say about that wall. Remember Sanballat and Tobiah against them? These men, when they were enemies of the Jews, that really wanted to exterminate the Jews, that hated the Jews, as mentioned in the first part of Nehemiah. Tobiah said, and he mocked them, made fun of these guys. They're going to take an old rubbish and use them for stones. That's what they said. They said if a fox gets up on top of your wall's going to fall down. In stark contrast, now the wall's finished and they're standing on top of the wall. And their shouts and their joy is so loud it's heard from afar off. I thought And I think it's used in more than one place in the Bible, the joy of the Lord. Well, it wasn't only the joy of the Lord that was their strength, it was their witness as well. The worship that they were doing, they got so loud that it just came out of them, and it was a witness to the people around them. No longer could they say that a fox could run across you. But now all the leaders and people and priests and the singers and everybody was on top of the wall and was celebrating the completion, the mile they had reached. I heard twice this week in listening to different Christian people talking, and I heard being involved in a building program, and you know that this was going to be a milestone for the church, but the preacher said in the end it turned out to be more like a millstone. Millstone, right? And you remember what Jesus said about if you offend one of these little ones, it would be better that a millstone be tied to your neck and you thrown in the water than to offend. How we treat one another. Yeah, it's sad to say that so many churches get in the building program and things get so out of hand that before it's finished it becomes, and it is a milestone that they're reaching in the church. Yeah, it happens, and it happens a whole lot, and the problem I think comes in Christ and gets on their buildings and their things, and it happens in people's lives. But what we gain that can be used for the Lord should be in our life and in the life of a group of people given to God, dedicated to the Lord. How did God speak to you from His Word? I believe I can open up the Bible any place in the Bible, and I preach from it. And I believe that God can speak through that Word to people that listen. We're going to sing our crowd song, and there's a place of prayer here as God. You volunteer to get up and come and pray about it. Let's stand.